Okay, welcome back everybody. I hope you had an enjoyable coffee and a few snacks and a bit of a catch up with friends and colleagues. To get right back into the logistics, Leaders in Logistics conference, our first presentation after the break is about the influence of the GCC rail expansion for our logistics sector. Ladies and gentlemen, we have here today the Executive Director of Commercial and Operations for Etihad Rail. Please give a warm welcome to John Lesniewski.
Good morning, everybody. It certainly is my pleasure and definitely my privilege to be here standing in front of everybody and talking about the evolution of Etihad Rail and how we are going to fit into the GCC logistics network. And following on from this morning's presentations, which I thought were very thoughtful and informative, there's a few things that I will bring into my presentation later on as we progress. So you'll be able to see how we as a railroad are not developing and operating in a vacuum. We are developing and making sure that we are integratable into the logistics network. We're in touch with all the hubs. We're using technology. And we're doing as best we can to get here as fast as we can. So with that in mind, I'd like to just progress. So I'm going to talk, I always start my presentations because we are a developing railroad, we are building it as we speak today. I always give a definition of what our network is so there's a clear understanding because railroads are a new feature in the options for modal transportation. And so we are always introducing the rail concept into the market. So I always start and I talk about our network. I also will give an update of where we are today, and I have some very interesting news for you on that front. I will then talk about some of the market opportunities because that is why we're all here, is how can we integrate rail logistics into the supply chain industry in the area and globally, and talk about then the efficiency of the value proposition of railroads because there's a perception that railroads are very good between terminals, but from terminal to door, there's always issues. So we're going to talk about how some of the technology that was even discussed this morning will be able to influence better delivery of products from terminal to door. And then finally, at the end, I'm going to talk about can the railroad replace feeder vessels? This has been a topic of conversation, and I would probably say I've been asked this particular question 10, 15 times in the last year. And so I'm going to give an answer that helps everybody understand a little bit about this. So this is our rail network. It's developed in 3 stages. We've done that on purpose so that we could manage the logistics of funding, manage the logistics of awarding contracts and managing contractors, and manage the logistics of procuring all the inventory, the rolling stock. So stage 1 is predicated on our delivery of sulfur products for ADNOC from 2 areas in the desert. First one that we will deliver sulfur from is from Hubshan. That's the origin point, that's the loading point, and it goes to Ruwais. That's the point where the sulfur is unloaded. It's bottom dropped onto conveyor belts, which takes it out to large storage sheds, and from there it goes on to vessels. The second loading point is in Shah. The 2 plants are identical, just identical. So just as a matter of their phasing, they started with Hubshan, and then the next one is Shah. What's very interesting, and this is what we're so proud to announce today, that our first trains ran yesterday. That's a major accomplishment. So I have to clarify that a little bit. They were running, they were not loaded with sulfur, they did not go into the terminals, but they went to the gate. So that's a very, very important thing, is that we have in the UAE now railroads, locomotives, pulling wagons on tracks, on the ground in the UAE. And the good thing is our team of consultants, our team of planners, engineers, construction specialist, procurement specialist. We accomplished all of this in a little over 18 months. That's a miracle. That is really a miracle to have built all this track in 18 months. And so we are so proud of these days, and we will be penetrating into the Ruwais terminal to practice running through all their facilities. And very shortly, we will be going to Habshan, where we can begin testing, unloading the sulfur into the wagons. So we do plan to have regular operational service in place, running probably in the end of the year, early January. There's always a ramp-up time. We've done dynamic testing for some time, and not dynamic testing, static testing, where we test all the electronics in the locomotives and the wagons and the switching systems, et cetera. Now we're doing dynamic testing, which actually tests the locomotives rolling on the tracks, and then we will get into loading testing and then trial run testing. So we have a lot of testing because we're very, very conscious about health, safety, and environmental impact. So that's one of our major objectives within the organization. So that's stage one. Stage two will start from the Ruwais area there, and it will go to Guayfat so that we can connect to the Saudi rail. When it comes that way, we anticipate connection there in 2018. We will be there before that, but Saudi's participation in the GCC, their target date is for 2018, so that's what we're shooting for at that point. Stage 2, Phase B, goes from the Tarif area, Liwa area, and it goes out to El Ain. When we complete these two, we will have met our obligation to touch the GCC rail main line at that point and touch the GCC and go into Muscat at that point. So within a very short time, we will have met our obligation, long-term obligation, to connect to the GCC main line. We have Phase C within Stage 2. This is probably the most complex because it is going into Jebel Ali and is going into Port Khalifa, and it's connecting a lot of the freight that will be moved in the future will be moving on this segment of the network. We had Phase D and E are for procurement and systems, so they're not a physical stage, but we have Stage F, and Stage F goes into Musafa. That is where there's a lot of the receiving end of a lot of the cargo coming out of the ports will be going into Musafa. So we have several terminals in Musafa. So we're targeting for this to be completed by the end of 2017, maybe 2018. But the good news is we've done all the engineering. We've tendered it out. All the bids came back. We've done all the analysis. We are ready to award these contracts within the next few weeks. We would like to have the contractor mobilized, contractors, multiple contractors for each phase. We would like to have all the contractors mobilized and ready to start construction by the end of the year or early in 2014, where there is a lot of work to be done. This is a design, procure, and build contract, so they have to do a lot of the detail design and engineering before they can start construction. So we anticipate we'll have another 6, 7, 8 months of detailed engineering work going on before we can start actual construction. Then we have the alignment in, we call this Stage 3. It's in Northern Emirates. What's interesting here, and I color-coded this on purpose, is that the sulfur line is in yellow because this is basically a container line here because it's picking up containers at the ports. We put those in blue so you can kind of see where the container business is. And then the red line is for the aggregates coming out of the Northern Emirates. The aggregates represent perhaps our heaviest tonnage that will be moved on the railroad. We're targeting perhaps 40 to 50 million tons of aggregates coming down from the Emirates, from the Northern Emirates down into the Emirates, and maybe all the way over to Qatar by rail. And that will be moving in open hoppers, bottom drop open hoppers, and those are 100-ton wagons, 100-ton hoppers. So each one of those wagons can have the capability to move almost 2 truckloads of aggregates, sand, and cement. So what we will be doing is removing a tremendous number of trucks from the highway. Until we are operational, those trucks will need to stay on the highway. But once we become operational, we will be removing the trucks for the long-haul portion of their journey. The trucks will still be needed to go from the quarries or the crushers to our loading terminals, and then they will need to go from the destination terminals to the final customer's door. So there'll still be lots of opportunity for truck companies in the UAE, but what we are doing is taking out the long-haul segment. What that does is decongest the highways, reduces the environmental impact, improves safety, and it just makes for the whole benefit. This is one of the extreme benefits of the rail, is that it's going to improve the sustainability of the environment and the business environment. Here's some key facts about the railroad. I think, Mahmoud, you showed this slide earlier. 1,200 kilometer network length, mainly double track, around 300 structures and 10 tunnels. Design speeds, freight is designed to go up to 120 kilometers per hour. And passenger, we will build the freight network first. Passenger will be added later. It's a second stage. And the freight trains are designed for 120. Passengers designed for 200 kilometers per hour. What that means is, if we only designed a whole network for 120, the passenger trains could not travel at 200. But by designing the network for speeds of 200 for the passenger trains, we can run the freight at a slower speed, and we can run the passenger at the higher speed. So this has been incorporated already into our designs. And we have designed and built our network to the best of international standards. We'll talk about some of the innovations in just a little bit. And the important thing is that we're also working with the GCC Secretariat General for rail transportation across the GCC. And all of our standards are GCC compliant, whether it's a technical standard, and now we're developing commercial standards with the GCC based on OTIF. And we're starting with diesel locomotives. There's just not enough. If we were to build this to start with electric locomotives, the price of construction would be considerably higher, so it's better to start with diesel. However, what we know is in the future we might electrify. So what we've done is designed all of the tolerances for height for the catenaries for electric transportation to be in place. So in the future, should we decide to electrify it, we are ready to do so, and it will not hinder us by having bridges in the way or transmission lines or anything else. We're ready to go with electrification in the future. So now I'm going to give you just a brief update on Stage 1 construction. Some of you may seen these pictures from previous presentations that I have done. We have been moving a lot of earth, sand basically, to build a railroad. We have moved 60 million cubic meters of sand. Just as a reference for you, the Giza pyramids is 2.5 million cubic meters. So we have moved about 25 pyramids, Giza pyramids. So that's a tremendous amount of sand, and we still got another 40 to go. So we're moving sand all over the place. And it's interesting here is because you can see what we do is some of these dunes that we're going through are 200 to 300 meters high, and we can't go around them, so we do have to go through them. So what we do is we cut the top off some of the dunes, and then we fill it in on the bottom. Because trains like to go on a level path, they don't like to go up or down because of the amount of weight that they do pull. They pull 10, 11,000 tons. That's a lot. So the locomotives like to go as flat as possible. Our grade inclines shouldn't really exceed 1%. 0.5% is favorable for us. So that means that we have a long ramp up and then a long ramp down whenever we're going up and down through different terrains. So what we have to do is cut the tops off some of the dunes and fill in between the valleys. We have had to build a, we call it a railhead. There's three terminologies that I can introduce here. One is a terminal. That's where freight comes and goes. It's either loaded onto the train or offloaded onto the train. We also have stations, so we have passenger stations, and we have railheads. A railhead is where when you're building the railroad, you start with all of your supplies and equipment and manpower, and you build out in both directions. So our railhead was originally established in Murpha, and this is a picture of it from several months ago. In the intervening time, it has been developed to the point where it is operational now. So there's many more tracks, there's a lot more construction on site, and you wouldn't even recognize it if I had an up-to-date photo, but I don't, so I'm sorry, you know. I can just talk about it. We have also built a lot of bridges along our right-of-way, and the reason we did that is because for safety, we do not want to have trains, trucks, and other vehicles crossing on grade level. So we are a grade-separated railroad. There's not many of those in the world. And when you talk about technology, people always think of technology as a computer or a cell phone or something like that. This is technology, simple technology, but it is technology. It's innovation. We have separated transportation from vehicles with transportation by rail. They can both go faster. They can both travel with more safety. So that's an innovation, and we've done that. So, by the way, most of these bridges are now done because of trains running up and back. Other innovations that we had to do was to build a factory to produce the sleepers. Sleepers are the things that are on the ground that the rails are put on, and it distributes the weight of the train as it goes over. Most of the world uses wood sleepers, but modern technology is now transferring that technology to concrete because they last longer, and you can produce them a little bit faster, and it's not cutting down trees, so it's a sustainability issue that we're working with here too. The factory is quite large. They can produce, there's 6 assembly lines. Each one produces 400 sleepers a day, so we're producing about 2,500 sleepers a day. Since we started with this factory, we have produced over 600,000 sleepers. We will need for the entire railroad about 1.5 million or 1.7 million sleepers. So we were another innovation. Instead of just buying, we decided to produce these ourselves and save the money for the economy. You know, it's just one of those things. Also, here's a picture of that factory from the outside, and these are the stacks of the sleepers stacked up. We even started manufacturing way in advance of the need for the sleepers on the ground so that we had an inventory to consume and we could work as fast as possible. You can also see here, those are the steel rails that have been delivered to the site. There is ESI is a local producer of steel. However, they do not produce the right type of steel, and it would take several years for them to implement that technology and get it certified so that we can insure the railroad with the right insurance companies, and they say, okay, these are certified rails. So we had to import those rails from Italy. Italy is one of the best producers of steel rails, and we have, I think it's 55,000 tons of rails on site now. So here's the rails, and then we talk about using technology. Here's an example of technology. This is a rail laying and sleeper laying piece of equipment. We put the ballast on the ground. We lay the rails on the ground, and it's so interesting is because you would think you'd put the sleepers and then the rails. No, they'd go the other way around. They put the rails on the ground because it's the easiest way of doing that. And then this machine comes along, and what it does is it picks up a stack of sleepers from here, and it drops them down around here. And you can see what this machine does is picks up the rails, pulls them apart, drops the sleeper in place, puts the rails back in the right position, and then this man sitting right under here, he presses a button and it twists the rails to the sleepers with a little hydraulic wrench that locks it in place, and it is so fast, so efficient. We are laying When we produced this slide originally, we were laying just over 1 kilometer of track a day. We have become so good at it, we are getting closer to 2 kilometers of track per day. I mean, that's phenomenal. So we've incorporated, again, another type of innovation, another type of technology to produce our railroad. And, we could have gone the old ways, but we're doing the best we can. I think, Mahmoud, your question of what's the best way of going? Should you be good and fast or best and last? I think we're very fast, and I think we're amongst the best. So Ittihad Rail is the best and very fast. So I would just want to thank you for that. Okay, our locomotives, they are manufactured in the United States. They're heavy haul. They've all been delivered to site. As I said, they are now operational. And these are diesel-electric locomotives. The diesel engine is located in the center of the locomotive. It produces approximately 4,600 horsepower, but that horsepower is not delivered to the wheels. If it did, there'd be so much energy lost through the transmission to the wheels that instead what happens is that diesel engine turns generators, which produces electric power. That electric power then drives 6 sets of wheels, 6 axles with electric motors. So when the locomotive engineer puts a little bit of power onto the train, that power is immediately delivered to the track. So these are very, very powerful locomotives. They're amongst the most powerful in the world, and they have the best traction rating amongst any locomotive in the world. And the reason we did this is because our trains are 100 wagons long. Each wagon carries 100 tons, so each train is moving approximately 10,000 tons of sulfur. These are the sulfur trains. The aggregates will be very similar. There will be 100 wagons or 90 wagons, again moving 10,000 tons. We have a little bit of flexibility. We could go up to 110 wagons if and when we need be. If we need to catch up on any kind of sulfur loading and deliveries, or help ADNOC with meeting some market demands. So we have that flexibility of going up to 110 wagons. But the trains are designed to be 100 wagons long, 10,000 tons. These are some of the facts about these locomotives. It's about 5 meters high. They're very, very big. They're almost 23 meters long, 4,300 horsepower. The maximum speed is 112, and they weigh 190 tons each. They're very, very big. We had very interesting time with logistics, getting them shipped to here, offloaded, put on trucks, and taken out to the site. Our hoppers for the sulfur, they were manufactured in China by China Rail Manufacturing Company. We had 240 manufactured, and they are delivered. They're on site. That means we can have, as you recollect, I said, we have 2 trains a day. Each train has 100 wagons, so we need 200 wagons. We got 40, so that means that we can always have 10 sets of 10 in maintenance routine at all times. And so if one set of 10 were to have some kind of mechanical problem, we could identify it and pull it out and work on that set of 10 and then replace it with one of the other sets of 10. And we still have a little bit of flexibility in how we can assemble the wagons because we still would have 30 remaining. When we're talking about technology, this is a very simple hopper wagon, but it's not. This is the most sophisticated hopper wagon in the world. And I'm going to show you a few of the things that makes it that way. First off, ADNOC does not want to have a purification problem with the sulfur that they're selling. They're very concerned about sand getting into the top of the wagons and contaminating the sulfur granules that are in the wagon. So what we did was develop closed tops for the wagons. They open like this. When the wagon goes for loading, it passes under a silo. The sulfur comes down into the wagon. Top closes, it's sealed. No sand will get into that wagon. They have a very, very tight seal on that, on the tops. When it gets to the loading point, see these little white points here, those are called quick drop switches. We don't have to pull a wagon over the pit, stop the train, and drop the sulfur. These have trippers built into the side of the unloading facility, and as the train pulls forward, it trips that switch up, the doors open, the sulfur drops out, and the train does not have to stop its motion. So we can load and offload these wagons in less than 3 minutes. So loading is 2 minutes, so 100 wagons times 2 minutes is 200 minutes, so we're talking about a 3-hour loading time and around 3.5 to 4 hour offloading time. So we have taken, we literally have gone, we've traveled around the world and we looked at how other people are doing this, and we've taken the best ideas and incorporated them into our trains. Now you're talking about technology again. This is not a computer, this is not a cell phone, this is just an idea. And the idea is that we have these quick trips. We didn't invent it, the Australians came up with this, we just took this idea and brought it forward. The Saudis were the ones that came up with having the tops closing on the wagons. We didn't invent that. We took it, we've improved upon it. So now we have what are really state-of-the-art wagons, and everything is controlled on these wagons. We have RFDI, we have sensors, you can't see them, but we have sensors on every bearing on every axle. The biggest danger for wagons is heating of the bearings. If the bearing overheats, it can lock, and once that wheel locks, then the train is so powerful it doesn't care if one wagon's wheel has been locked, it just pulls that locked wheel along the tracks. And so what happens is you have a round wheel with a flat bottom, and the wheel is destroyed. It's very expensive. So what we've done is we have put a sensor, a temperature sensor, on every bearing on the train. The locomotive has a control panel that is connected to every wagon, and if any particular component starts overheating, the signal goes to the locomotive. If the type of incident says that they can make it back to the terminal in time, they will do so. If the incident is so bad, they will stop the train. They can come out, they actually lift up the wagons, put a new wheel and bearing in place, and then the train can move on. But the idea is that we're doing preventative maintenance, not reactive maintenance, and that is an innovation. Railroads used to live on reactive maintenance, and we are going for preventative maintenance. We also have, in the tracks, you can't see them, but right about here on that particular photo is a box that has a sensor in it, and it listens to the wagons as they go over. Every wagon, because it's RFDI tagged, has a sound, what do they call it, a audible signature to each wheel. And as that wagon passes over the sensor, it listens for every wheel, and it identifies which wheel it is by the wagon, by the RFDI tag, and it says, this wheel should sound like this. And if it has a slightly different sound, it's going to know that maybe there's a crack in the center of that wheel, or maybe there's too many flat spots on the wheel, and that wheel needs to be maintained before it can either get damaged or it could crack, break, cause a derailment, and cause issues that way. So again, proactive maintenance. We're doing all these things in advance to make sure that we don't have any major issues. This is an innovation. This is technology, low-level technology, not high-level technology. We also have sensors that travel as a train travels along. It not only doesn't listen to the wheels, it listens to the track, because you could be developing cracks, internal stress cracks in the rail as a train constantly goes over a stretch of track. And if the sound signature for that section of track is not the same as it's supposed to be, then we will send the maintenance crew out, cut out that section, put a new section in, and we're continuing to operate with safe track, not potentially disastrous track. So let's talk about some market opportunities. I'll go as fast as I can here. Here's the UAE's rail footprint, as we talked about before. This is the GCC main line, and it goes from Muscat across the UAE, branch goes up to Qatar, we go across to Bahrain, goes to Dammam, and goes all the way up to Kuwait City. That's the GCC as it's designed. Saudi has had some existing rail in place since 1956. It was built by Bechtel to bring oil field equipment from Dammam out to the desert in Hufuf. And by the way, if you want, this presentation will be available for everybody, so you just enjoy that. You don't have to worry about not capturing it all. So the section in black there is the existing railroad. It carries both freight from the port to Riyadh, and it does also carry passengers between Dammam and Riyadh. The Saudis have developed what they call their north-south line. There are some iron ore and phosphate mines in this area, so they built this line going to Jubail so that they can, very similar to what we're doing with sulfur, they're moving that product to Jubail for manufacturing into steel and other products for export. That became operational in July or August of 2011. This section here has been built, and it is in commissioning right now, so they will be able to go from Riyadh up to basically Jordan. And so you know, MODAN, the Saudi Development Agency, has identified some industrial development cities along the way, and rail is definitely a component of supplying those hubs. They become hubs, economic hubs, and the rail is a critical ingredient in making sure that they're successful. So they're being incorporated. We also have then the land bridge line going from Jeddah to Riyadh. This is important because containers can be moved from Jeddah all the way to Dammam and beyond, and that helps balance the flow of empty containers, because right now empty containers are trucked all the way from Jeddah to Dammam so that they can be loaded with petrochemical products, secondary products, and exported in containers because there's not enough containers in Dammam. So this will actually allow the railroad to fill that vacuum. And then finally, there is the high-speed rail line that connects Mecca and Medina. There is a rail line doing that already, but this will be a brand new high-speed rail line that's construction has started. So this, I don't know if it's 300 or 350. I'll find that out someday. And then, by the way, Saudi has additional plans for filling in the rest of their country with rail infrastructure in the future, basically connecting all these industrial cities. So the good news from this for the UAE is freight coming in at Jebel Ali will be able to go to Riyadh, any of these industrial cities along here, be able to go along here, go up to Kuwait. So there could be a significant advantage to the logistics industry here, because now you can serve customers in these industrial cities around the region, and you can have your consol and deconsol activities, or deconsol and reconsol activities in and around the Jebel Ali area, and Port Khalifa, and that will actually drive a lot of additional logistics business to you. So if you're thinking, what's the market opportunity for me? Start thinking of where are these industrial cities going to be in Saudi? What kind of products are going to be produced there? What kind of raw materials need to get there? What kind of products are they producing that need to come back out? Are they coming into the UAE? Are they passing through the UAE for export through one of our ports? Or are they going into Oman? So these are the market opportunities that you need to start thinking of in advance, because the smart people will do it, and you have to be amongst the smart people to be ready for when we are operational. So where are the traffic generators within the UAE? As I talked about, there's the sulfur. We also have intermodal traffic coming out of the ports, and it will either go, a lot of it will go out into Saudi from there. We expect a large portion of the intermodal traffic will go out through Saudi. Aggregates coming down from the Northern Emirates. And this is, you know, you're used to thinking of your logistics business as moving containers or moving products coming in from containers or vessels and then putting them onto trucks. Has anybody in here from the logistics provider thought of becoming an aggregates mover or a cement mover? Because there's a supply chain for that. If there's anybody here, could you raise your hand? I'd like to see. None. Well, there's an opportunity waiting, because when we become operational for the Northern Emirates in 2018, there will be a lot of traffic that needs to be moved by logistics providers, different than what you're used to doing now, but it will be there. We also move we will be moving a lot of steel from the steel plants that are coming up, whether it's inbound raw materials or outbound finished products. Cement factories in the Northern Emirates, once again, if you haven't thought of maybe getting involved with this, there is that opportunity. And it's going to, you know, you could set up a application that would manage loading and unloading of aggregates, and doing that through a portal that you could sell on a service subscription level to these crushers. Nobody's doing that yet. There's a business opportunity there. Right now they're doing everything by paper. So there's a business opportunity. You'd have to think it through and see if it's the right one for you, but there is a business opportunity there. And then another one that's on the future horizon for us is waste management, not only with Abu Dhabi, who we have an MOU with, but with Dubai and the other Emirates. These, we have done a tremendous amount of research. We're not just making estimates on what we think the rail network and the industry will be. We've actually done a lot of interviewing of actual shippers. Many of you probably already can raise your hand and say, yeah, we've talked to you about your future volumes. Again, you can see aggregates are big, metals are small right now, but they will grow. Cement is okay. Intermodal has some traffic, and then the other is bulk. That's just what's ever out there is being moved by truck right now. And these are basically all being moved by truck right now. What we then did was figured out what was a realistic growth percentage for the future for these commodities. We did not just say everything's 20% or everything's 10%. We talked to the individual commodity shippers and found out what they think is going to be their growth, and we modeled all of this on separate growth factors for each one. So our average growth for the whole economy is only 4.8%. Very, very conservative. We would rather be conservative and buy into a larger market than buy too much equipment and have it sit idle, unproductive, and at a loss for a number of years. So we can grow into the market, but we do not want to overestimate. When we convert those growth factors times the 2009 tonnage, these are the 2020 total tonnage to be moved by either truck or by rail. And then what we did was we modeled this. We have a cube modeling software application that tells us approximately how much of each one of these commodities can be moved by rail based on price and distance. And this was a tonnage that was estimated to be moved by rail. So 31 million tons. For aggregates, metal products, 14 million. Intermodal, that's 11.5 million tons in containers. 7.2 million tons for sulfur. That's just the ADNOC business. Clinker and cement come almost 6% there. So what we've done then is we've sized our fleets of wagons around these numbers, and then from that we can determine how many locomotives we need to buy, and then we can size the layout of all of our terminals so that we know we have large enough terminals, but we have not overinvested in terminals. This is the share of each one of those commodity groups. And by the way, since we did these initial numbers, we have been able to talk to individual customers on a one-on-one basis, and we have increased these numbers slightly. So we're actually, with market research, point-to-point market research, we're getting much better numbers. Rail efficiency and the value proposition. How will Etihad Rail support high-velocity supply chains? Well, again, as you see how we've had things laid out, I'm going to show you just, and again, everybody here is so used to thinking about containers, about moving containers from point to point. And I want you to think that the rail is opening up the entire economy to different types of modal transportation. So I'm going to talk about how we automated overhead loading and unloading at the sulfur locations in Habshan and Shah for loading and offloading in Ruwais. We didn't just do this. I mean, there was a lot of engineering work. These systems are mechanically integrated together. There's interlocking control systems, because if the train stops and the loading doesn't stop, we have a disaster. We just overload the train and it spills off the side. If the conveyance system for loading breaks, there's no reason to have the train sit idle. So we have all these things worked out in advance. This is what the supply chain looks like for sulfur, and it will be very, very similar for aggregates when it comes on board. So the train comes into a facility, we weigh the wagon as it's empty, so we know what the weight of the wagon is and how much product we need to load. It goes under a silo. Now this could either be sulfur from ADNOC, or it could be aggregates coming down from crushers in the mountains. We load it into the wagon, then the wagon, before it leaves the site, is weighed so that we know how much product was actually loaded into wagon 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then when it arrives at destination, we weigh wagon 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we see if the weight is the same as when it left, and that way we know if we've lost any product en route. This also electronically creates the bill of lading for us so that we have a bill of lading. And what we have is the interlocking control tower. So when the train passes underneath the tower, it drops the sulfur down at a certain speed. If the train's moving too fast, it won't get enough sulfur to load up to 100 tons per wagon. If it's going too slow, it will overload the wagon, which is unsafe. So what they do is they interlock the speed of the conveyor belts, the speed of the drop of the product, and the speed of the train. So if it's not loading enough, they can slow down the train a little bit. If it's loading too much, they speed it up a little bit, and it's all done electronically and automatically. So we are interlocked. Simple technology, but again, it's using technology to make our terminals more efficient, whether it's sulfur or aggregates. And the same thing for offloading. Once we offload, we bottom drop, it goes on conveyor belts to either storage in silos or all the way out to a vessel for distribution. And then we weigh the wagon again after it's open to see if there's any residual product in it that didn't get offloaded for safety factors. So again, very, very simple technology, just a few scales, a few conveyor belts, interlocking systems, but we are doing this. This is the best practices from around the world. That's why we're so proud of what we're accomplishing. For the aggregates in the country, this shows that the majority, the line thickness shows how much tonnage is moving on the tracks. So the majority is coming down from the Northern Emirates, and then it gets distributed, and some of it goes out here. So this is what our hopper trains will look like. For double stack technology, the intermodal, the large ports will have the automated gantries to expedite offloading of the containers onto the stack, and then from the stack onto the train. We use double stack trains. Come on. We use double stack trains, which you can see here. The advantage of that is that the locomotive is pulling one level of wagons. If you have two levels of containers in the wagon, you're pulling twice as much freight with the same number of locomotives, basically. So you're doubling your efficiency, and that's why double stack technology is so economical for you as a provider of logistics services, so that you can better price your service to your customers compared to truck. So that's where the savings come in from double stack technology. And besides having the automated gantries at the ports or the major terminals, we can also use reach stackers, so that at the smaller terminals or customer facilities, they can also offload the containers, and they don't need to have very expensive automated equipment. These are where the container flows will be. You can see, obviously, the majority will be coming out of Jebel Ali and going to Saudi Arabia. We don't show a lot for Port Khalifa at this time, because when we did our initial study, there was not a lot of identified container traffic. However, as Port Khalifa is developing, we're identifying more and more potential container traffic coming out of that port. These are what the 3PLs have told us over the last year, 2 years, 3 years already. They see an increase in containerized cargo of 4 to 8% a year over the next 10 years. 46% of it will be moving inland. What that means is, let's say Jebel Ali's 14 million TEUs right now, about 5 million of those TEUs, 4 or 5 million, are being grounded in Dubai. for local consumption or forward transportation into Saudi. So this, what you see here is a growth of deconsolidation and reconsolidation of freight in the Jebel Ali area for transportation by double-stack containers into Saudi Arabia. So you're talking about a business opportunity, start thinking about how you can have the right type of facility, warehousing facility available in probably about three and a half years so that you can take advantage of the reconcile business opportunity that will be coming along. I'm just about done. I'm getting chased. Can rail replace feeder vessels? We will not replace feeder vessels. We will complement feeder vessels. So here's the model of what exists now. The mothership, the 18,000 TEU vessel, comes into Jebel Ali. It gets transloaded into maybe 4,000 or 5,000 TEU feeder vessel that goes to Dammam. Then by truck or train, it goes to Riyadh. This whole supply chain here could take a day or two here, a day or two here, demurrage, day or two, a couple days in port, a day or two here. So it could take 8 to 10, 12 days to get from Jebel Ali to Riyadh or the other industrial locations within Saudi. The other model is if it's the feeder vessel takes the container off the ship and it puts it into the warehouses, and then it's reconsolidated, and it can go by truck into Saudi, as a lot does go. However, it does have the border inspection issue where they could spend anywhere from 3-5 days or longer, maybe up to a week or more. And then from the border point, from the border point, it can go into Riyadh by truck from there. So this could take a good 8 to 10 days going by truck. The new option will be for rail service. Once the container is brought into Jebel Ali, it can be taken off, put into a stack, and immediately put on a train without having to clear customs. It will be traveling inbound in a double-stack train, and we have already had discussions with both the UAE customs and the Saudi customs about eliminating a stop at the border to inspect any containers. So the inspection will occur at the destination. It's called Origin Destination Service. The GCC has accepted in principle this concept. We're all working towards implementing it now. Saudi is even interested in where these advanced forward terminals will be located so they can build customs facilities large enough to handle. So if we can get there in 2 days, you can see the advantage to your supply chain. You definitely will get the freight there much faster. Cost of the product, inventory handling cost is much lower. The velocity of the supply chain is much lower. So are we going to replace the feeder vessels? No, we're not. No. There's a good 10, 12 million containers that will still be needed to be moved by feeder vessel. However, this comes back to what Motion said earlier. You have that supply chain case where you have the high-value goods, and then you have the fashion goods that need to be shipped fast because spring fashions are only needed in the spring, fall fashions are needed in the fall, and they don't carry in the stores. So they got to get there at the right time. If you're going to have your goods delayed on sea because of a jam at the port, it's not very good. If you put it on the train and you know you can get it there in 2 days, you're going to opt for using the train for time-sensitive freight. So that is what we are offering. Not a replacement for feeder vessel service, but a complement to it for the right type of freight. And that's where we can help your supply chains. So talk to us. Let us know what are your time-sensitive freight categories, where they're coming from, where they're going to. We can build this into a uniform bill of lading, origin destination bill of lading that would include the ocean vessel, the rail, and the truck delivery as one part of a uniform bill of lading. So we'd like to talk to all of you about that as a business opportunity. And so in general, all the 3PLs will need to learn how to work with the railroad because it is a new industry here, and we're gradually introducing it to everybody, and there's, I think, actually a question coming up in just a few minutes about that. Has this been of any knowledge gain for you? And thank you very much. And And I apologize for taking so long. I just get so excited talking about this. I can't stop myself.
Okay, and thanks very much, John. I think we're all a little bit wiser now about a subject that I dare say nearly all of us are well interested in. And I must say congratulations again to Etihad Rail on getting your rolling stock literally rolling yesterday. Well done. Now, we're a little bit behind, but I'm sure we're going to be able to make up the time to get our on-time KPI back on track. We've got a panel right now about regional hubs, how to link and leverage them. So I'll ask the panellists to please make their way forward and take a comfortable seat on the stage. I believe Majid might need to leave, though, very shortly, if not now. You okay? Okay. And John, if you'd care to join us, we'll pick your brains once again if we can. Well, actually, you could even take the podium, John, if you'd like. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down amongst the audience and do my Jerry Springer impersonation.
Okay, so do you want me to kind of follow your list here?
Oh, no, that's all right.
Well, I need the list.
Well, I'll just talk it through.
Okay, you can talk it through. Okay.
So I'll just, in addition to John that we've already met, we have Mustafa Kawam, the Managing Director of Globe Express Services. We have Majid Zembaraji, CEO of RAC Logistics, Stuart Bowie, Managing Director of GAC, and Mark Appleyard, Senior Logistics Manager of Modon. So before we start talking about rail and picking John's brains once again, I just want to get a bit of a picture about the hub network that we're actually talking about. Now, this hub that I have in my mind, and I guess in the minds of most of the audience here, it's a region that I guess stretches from Salalah and Sohar in Oman up to Jebel Ali, Sharjah, Port Khalifa, Doha, Bahrain, Dammam, right up into Kuwait, across to Jeddah, and not to mention the various airport hubs within that region. Now, the gentlemen that we have assembled here, we've got some infrastructure providers, and we've also got the 3PLs. Mustafa, Majid and Stuart are all 3PL leaders based here, but generally working across the region. So let me ask the 3PLs first. As leaders of some of the most extensive 3PL operations and infrastructure across the whole of the GCC, what factors do you consider when you're choosing which hubs in this whole region to use? Anyone want to volunteer?
I'll take that on, Michael, since I have to run a little bit early. But I think in general, if you look at the regional hubs across the region, there's about $40 billion being invested in ports infrastructure across the region in a matter of a few years. That will take us from a capacity of approximately 24 million TEUs across the region up to about 34 million TEUs, out of which Jebel Ali makes about 14 million. So it's actually very interesting in terms of the port centricity infrastructure that is actually being invested, which is, by the way, extremely important to guarantee the flow of the trade. The question is, how is the port competition is going to take place between what today is being handled by Jebel Ali in general as a major port in the region versus Salalah, for example, that handles about 4.5 million TEUs, or smaller ports such as in Kuwait and Bahrain, which are around the 1 million. So it's actually very interesting to actually see how the whole infrastructure is going to actually change. In addition to, of course, what John mentioned in terms of the interconnectivity between the different states, which is going to become tremendously better. not to mention to be more efficient. I mean, 300 containers per rail is actually a very large amount, not to mention the CO2, 10%, 15% usage on CO2 versus the trucks, which is a tremendous advantage. So I think there's a lot on the table. I think the business model of Jabal Ali today has been portrayed as a huge success in the region, and I think many other governments would like to actually portray a similar type of gain as well as economic development within their free zones, within their infrastructures, which will be very interesting to see how that's going to develop over the next couple of years.
Okay, thanks. Stuart, you've got quite an extensive infrastructure there. What do you look for when you're choosing hubs?
Yes, sorry. I've got kind of mixed thoughts on hubs. The most important thing, obviously, for when choosing a hub is what the customers are looking for us to do. And having been fortunate, I've lived in this region since 1988, I've learned that the customers vary enormously in their requirements and their demands. But I'm trying to think of Majid, sorry, to go to your point there, I think that one of the main reasons why there's been a success in the UAE and Jabal Ali in particular stems from not only infrastructure. Infrastructure is obviously hugely important, and it's interesting to see the investments that are being made, but it's the mentality of the government authorities, not only the infrastructure, but the business mentality of the authorities in the UAE in particular, and also particularly in Jabal Ali, the free zone, the ports, airports, etc. So it's not only the buildings, the roads, the ports, all of those things. It's the business focus, the business supporting mentality of the authorities in the UAE particularly that's helped. Now, if other countries in this region wish to set up hubs and compete on those levels, that's the level they have to achieve in order for us as 3PLs or forwarders or carriers or whatever. Providing that mentality, that business attitude will be enormously important going forward.
Okay. Thanks, Stuart. I just want to direct a new question to the entire panel. The sales pitches conducted by the port and the free zone authorities, they're all very impressive. But there appear to be plenty of attractive incentives being offered to the larger organisations to draw you into them. Now, do you believe that there's a difference between this sell job, this perception that they're creating, and the actual reality of operating within the hubs? Who's a volunteer for that one?
Okay. Usually, whenever you are marketing for any new product or service, expectations are always very high. However, based on our experience in the region, especially in UAE, the perception is being well achieved, and the reality is so impressive. If you look at the figures of ports in UAE, they account for 61% of the total trade volume in GCC, so which is very good.
I see Mark looking very interested. You've been on both sides of the fence, so to speak. Now, Mark, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I would agree, but I would also say that as I've been a victim of a mis-sell, you could say, on occasion, the authorities or the people who are selling these facilities have got to deliver consistent standards. If operators are going to set up on a hub or in an area of a hub, then the standards have got to be consistent. It's got to be a level playing field. Because if you've got a high-level logistics service provider building to a very high standard, he's got to be able to compete. And if the standard isn't consistent and then somebody comes in and builds a lower-level facility, then he's going to be disadvantaged. So I think consistency and standards are vital.
Okay. Any other volunteers on that particular subject? Perception versus reality in the hubs? Well, a quiet panel today. I won't actually take up too much of your time because I want to actually direct some of the questions to you from the audience. But I just want to move very quickly into subject relating to rail. What John, you spoke about the opportunity, for example, when it comes to the rail network in aggregates. But what are the new opportunities that are going to emerge for the sector? Now, when I say the sector, most of the operators here are either 3PLs, traditional 3PLs, or trading organisations themselves. So what new opportunities do you believe will emerge for those two sectors when the rail network is fully up and running? And has this been experienced in other regions?
Well, one of the areas that will be relatively new will be automotive distribution, totally new venue for us. Kendrick has been doing a lot of research on the automotive sector, and we have found that there is quite a demand for staging automotives before final distribution and shipping them to various points. So that's one that's coming. Another one that's very important is refrigerated containers, taking food from various parts of the Gulf countries and bringing them here for distribution. I think there's one Saudi company in particular, I won't mention the name, but I think they bring more than 250 trucks a day of refrigerated product into this area. Now that's something that could be very easily converted into refrigerated containers on trains. So there's a very big opportunity there. Plus, if you have refrigerated product coming into Jebel Ali that's destined for inland destinations, you need to find backhaul refrigerated product coming back. So there's connecting the two in both directions. And then finally, then there is the opportunity for, big opportunity for vertically integrated petrochemical products, final end products from petrochemicals that can be shipped in either tankers, which we're investigating, or in ISO container tankers that could be put onto the trains and transported that way. So those are three areas right off the top of my head.
Okay. Thanks, John. Now, there's one gentleman here that I actually neglected to introduce. You're actually Majdoui, yeah? Sorry? PricewaterhouseCoopers. Sorry, my mistake, my apologies. PricewaterhouseCoopers. What's your take on all of this then?
So I think, hello everybody. I just want to pick up on the point in terms of opportunities. I think there are probably a couple of other opportunities. We often think about the forward-looking supply chain or the trade chain as such, and we look at distributing aggregates or cement or whatever other products that we have. But we often neglect the sort of reverse trade chain, which is the I suppose sometimes when you look at waste, sometimes you look at removal of products that are actually not necessary now for value-added activities. I think there is a big thought process going on about how do we actually remove that wasteful products as well. So if anyone's looking at that sort of opportunity, that's a massive opportunity both in the construction industry, in the agricultural industry, in the production and process industry that's going on right now. So I think that reverse cycle is just as important as the forward cycle going through. And in that then, the support for having hubs, support for having an infrastructure that is able to do that is just as important for an infrastructure that is actually forward-looking as well. And that's something that I believe that a lot of the regions are just beginning to think about and really haven't designed. And it's happening by chance right now. So there's an opportunity there for people to come in and actually redesign that whole value chain, that whole trade chain in a different way than perhaps you're thinking about in terms of a logistics trade chain.
Just to add to that, one thing I've neglected to mention within the opportunity range is project freight, loading large valves, generators, pipes onto trains and moving them on train long distances instead of using truck, which is a little difficult at times. So we are gearing up for project freight also on our flat wagons.
Okay, thanks, gentlemen. Again, apologies to Masood Hassan, partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers. I did neglect to introduce you in the beginning. Let me just now see if we can direct some questions to the panel from the audience. Because I know it's a very popular subject matter, the rail network at this stage. Do we have any questions from the audience that you would like to direct to either any of the panel or to John directly? We have many. Excellent. Now, we have some young microphone ladies here this morning. And Oscar, you're looking like a very lovely young lady this morning. So just keep your hands up, folks, and Oscar will find someone with his microphone.
Good morning, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, John, for this interesting presentation.
You're welcome.
Okay, I believe the rail transportation is very promising industry, okay? But the point, taking into consideration and being realistic in the industrial actual situation and the crisis, and considering the cost cutting and the cost saving that every supply chain manager should think, or every general manager should think, what is the opportunities in terms of cost of transportation? If today I have a truck and I will load 20 feet container, for example, from Dubai to Doha, for example, and it's gonna cost me 3,000 dirhams, how is it gonna cost me, for example, by rail? Okay? This is the first part of the question. The second part of the question, if today, and all these gentlemen who are present with us, they have a big fleet of trucks, what is the future vision to use this truck? Should we change, the opportunity, or should we change our vision and strategy? And should we reduce or downsize our fleet because it's gonna be replaced, or it's gonna be cost effective? And what about the challenges that we are facing now in terms of borders, customs, in terms of time, and in terms of all this, the issues that you had mentioned, in terms of timing, and in terms of, the logistics, how to scan, for example, the wagons, and to scan the products, etc. Thank you very much.
On the pricing, rail typically is cheaper because if you're moving 260 TEUs, typically what we will be moving on our trains, that equates to a minimum of 130 trucks carrying the TEUs, whether it's a 40-foot or 220s. And so if you think about that, that's 130 trucks. It's 130 drivers, 130 sets of tires, 130 insurance